Well, good afternoon. Our path to a strong recovery starts with creating opportunity for people. Because when people have access to opportunity, they can move up in the world. They can build a better life for themselves. They can realize their full potential. And those opportunities need to start early in life. It has to start with our young people. And if the system is broken, they can't achieve their goals. Last year, over half of the students suspended were students with special education needs. Half of our black students aren't making the choice to pursue an academic stream in high school. Our black, indigenous, and racialized students face more social and economic barriers to success than their fellow students, and that's just not right. They deserve the same shot at their dreams as any other young person their age. So today, we're taking action. Today, we're bringing forward Ontario's new education equity strategy. We will reform suspensions for the primary grades, kindergarten to grade 3. We'll no longer suspend these very young students for non-serious offenses. And starting next year, we'll begin phasing out the practice of streaming for grade 9 students. It's unfair and it's not right to ask these students at such a young age to make a decision that will determine the rest of their high school and post-secondary careers. To make a decision at 14 years old that could affect the rest of their lives. At this age, everyone needs the same foundations for learning. Everyone needs the same opportunity for lifelong success. Streaming, it leaves students behind. At a young age, one decision could exclude a student from a world of opportunities later in life. It's wrong. The system is broken, and we're fixing it. So we're going to stop the practice, starting with grade 9 math curriculum in September 2021. No matter your race, religion, gender, or orientation, I want to see every student succeed. And I want to make something crystal clear. Racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, Islamophobia, and any kind of hate whatsoever has no place in our classrooms. Any teacher who engages in this type of behavior or who makes hateful slurs, they're done, they're gone. We're strengthening sanctions against teachers who engage in this type of behavior. As Premier, I won't tolerate it. We have to look out for our very young people. And I want to thank Minister Lecce for his leadership on this important strategy. And I especially want to thank Jamil Jivani for his guidance, advice on these critical issues. He's a true champion. I'm looking forward to seeing what our students can do when these roadblocks are removed. I want our young people to know that they can do anything they set their mind to. The sky is the limit. Whether you're learning a skilled trade, studying to be an engineer, doctor, or researcher, or thinking about starting up your very own business. I know our young people are going to make us proud. They are the future of this province, and my friends, knowing that, the future looks very bright. Thank you, and God bless the people of Ontario. I'll pass it over to Minister Lecce.
Well, thank you, Premier, and good afternoon. Today's an important day for many who have for generations felt ignored. 2 million students depend on our ability today to break down barriers to their success that impede their upward mobility and to break down those biases that exist within our society. The status quo is morally indefensible. The transformational change we're driving forward will embolden a generation of students to unleash their potential and to tear down the systemic barriers that hold them back. Nous allons libérer le plein potentiel de tous les élèves de l'Ontario. I have been moved by the stories of these kids and their parents. Whether they were told, they will amount to nothing. And these stories and the data that underscore the urgency for change today. In our largest school board, for example, in Toronto, Black students make up about 11% of the student population. However, they represent 34% of students receiving suspensions. Since 2014, overall suspension rates for students in junior kindergarten to grade 3 have increased. Over 40% of those suspensions were issued for discretionary reasons. We cannot allow this to continue. We're proposing to move forward in eliminating discretionary suspensions for students in kindergarten up to grade 3 starting this September. Now, of course, serious offenses would continue to face suspensions to keep staff and students safe. We're acting to ensure all young people can pursue ambitious career paths. Currently, students in grade 8, as the Premier noted, have to make a decision that affects their lives for decades. It's why our government is moving forward with the de-streaming of Ontario curriculum, beginning with the grade 9 math curriculum in September of 2021. The facts are clear. Students who are enrolled in applied courses are over 4 times less likely to graduate. In Toronto, 47% of Black students take applied courses, compared to less than 19% for non-Black students. Only 1/3 pursue post-secondary education. It's time we end this practice and give a fair chance to all of our kids. We've also heard from parents that Ontario's diverse student population must feel accepted in their schools. These families deserve accountability and justice for incidents of racist behavior in our classrooms. In battling racism and discrimination in our school system, we will hold staff accountable if you inflict trauma and hurt on these young kids' lives. These words live with them forever. And for that reason, we'll be working with the Ontario College of Teachers to strengthen sanctions for racist behavior and remarks within our classrooms. I also know we need to enhance mandatory training for our teachers and our education workers, and I know that they care deeply about this. So I've proposed additional mandatory training on anti-racism, and I'm calling and urging all of our partners, including our teacher unions, to get on board with this important step forward. And in partnership with the Ontario Trustees Association, we will create mandatory anti-racism training for every trustee in this province. Now, we also know that when schools reflect the communities around them, there are immediate and long-term positive impacts on our students. Better test scores, more consistent attendance, and reduced dropout rates. This is why the government will move forward with ensuring qualified and diverse candidates are given opportunities to work and to get promoted. Folks, we can literally change the lives of a generation. And our mission is to build a province where equality of opportunity is a reality, not an aspiration. This is the legacy that we will build together. I'd like to turn it over to Jamil Jivani. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Lecce. I stand before you today as a person who was streamed by the public school system in this province when I was a teenager. I was put into applied courses, and I know that very few people who experience streaming in our schools ever make it to a place like this, standing before you at an official podium alongside the Premier of Ontario. By the grace of God, I am here. I'm grateful to be here to work with this government to make changes to our education system. I stand with those who had their futures limited by previous policies, and I'm committed to making a difference for the next generation. Today's announcement by Premier Ford and Minister Lecce is significant for numerous reasons. We are challenging Ontario's education establishment to become more student-centered. The education establishment in this province, and by this I mean the school boards, teachers' unions, teachers' colleges, and other institutions that create the education status quo in Ontario, need to be challenged to serve students better. For well over a decade now, the provincial government has been falling in line with the establishment and waiting for them to change policies and practices. It's obvious that hasn't been working. Thankfully, we now have a premier who is shaking things up. The province is not waiting for the education establishment to change their policies and practices. Instead, the province is leading by example. More work must be done to continue this movement toward a student-centered school system, but today's announcement undeniably moves us in the right direction. This is also a critical moment because it is a victory for many parents and leaders in Ontario's Black communities who worked with this government to identify the actions we are taking now. Many of these community voices have historically fallen under the radar of past governments and also the news media. Governments and news media have typically paid attention to a small fraction of the Black community that makes the most noise and sends the most tweets. But there are many other voices in Ontario's Black community with a lot to say, such as moms and dads who send their children to our schools, those in churches and mosques and temples, those who lead sports and tutoring programs, and those who run businesses. Many of them deserve credit for bringing their voices to our government and advocating for change. I'm going to name some people specifically. I can't name everyone right now, but I do want to acknowledge a few folks who I think were critical to today's policy changes. I'm talking about people like Chris and Kamisha Blackwood, two parents who have 5 kids in the Toronto school system. And despite all the demands on their time, they found a time to create a province-wide petition asking for changes to streaming and suspensions. And they had over 500 families sign that petition. I'm also talking about folks like Devon Jones and his team in Jane and Finch who run the YACE program, which serves thousands of kids and parents every year. And also Warren Salmon and his team at the Ontario Alliance for Black School Educators, who are constantly coming up with new ideas for how the education system might be improved. Credit is due to each of them and many more. Thank you for making these changes possible. My hope is that we will remember today as a call to continue elevating voices in the Black community who have been historically ignored, and to look beyond the noise and the tweets. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the phone line for questions. First question.
First question comes from Lucas Meyer from News Talk 1010. Please go ahead.
Hi, Lucas.
Good afternoon, Premier. And actually, I have some questions for the Minister, if that's possible.
Yeah.
Minister Lecce, now that you're here, we still have no idea what school is going to look like, school to school, board to board in the fall. And of course, making that worse is the fact that we also really don't have a good snapshot of what childcare is going to look like, hopefully by August. And, you know, thanks to the great reporting that Caroline had in the Globe today, it seems as though some messaging to the boards has gotten a little bit mixed up lately as well. Considering all this, is the government recommending to families and parents, and I'm sure many have already done this, but do you want to take this opportunity to tell parents and families that they should talk to their employers right now about flexibility in the fall because of all of these unknowns? Should those conversations be happening right now?
Yeah, thank you for the question. When we made our announcement about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we made it very clear then, as we are today, that school boards in Ontario must be prepared for 3 circumstances given the variability that can take place over the coming weeks when it comes to public health and the ability of the province to continue to flatten the curve. A month ago, we made a judgment call that we need to be ready because that's the lesson learned from COVID-19. We need a plan to ensure the continuity of learning. The framework we unveiled, this government unveiled, will ensure that. And of course, the preference of the government continues to be everyday, day-to-day conventional in-class delivery, meaning students in class each and every day with heightened health and safety protocols. But the prerequisite has to be safety. And I would believe that that is a consensus position, that if we can get to a point, working with public health, the command table, and Dr. Williams and the Minister of Health, that it can be done, the aim of the government is to do it. So we're working very closely with the command table in this respect. Because of the good work of the people of Ontario over the past 3 weeks since we made that announcement, we've seen a significant reduction in the amount of cases of COVID in Ontario. And that's a credit to the people of Ontario for adhering to the advice of public health. So my point is, we're going to be prepared for 3 scenarios. The government's preference is everyday, day-to-day delivery, 5 days a week in class. And the obligation on us today, and we are doing this, is working closely with public health to get to a point that we can scale up that plan. But the reason why we have a plug-and-play scenario of 3 different plans is because we need to be ready. We do not know what will happen in August. And so out of abundance of caution, to ensure kids there's not a gap in learning, we're going to be ready for 3 circumstances with a preference for in-class, day-to-day delivery. That's something that we believe can be done. It just will require a continued work with the Chief Medical Officer of Health.
Follow up.
Okay. So the question was, should families and parents, is it your recommendation that they should be speaking with their employers right now about flexibility in the fall? And another question, if you can, has the government set aside funding for mobile portable classrooms?
So with respect to the first question, the government's hope and our aspiration, what we're working on over time as we speak to you, with the Chief Medical Officer of Health and the COVID-19 command table, is to provide an in-class, day-to-day delivery of education, meaning every day in the week. So we hope to avoid that circumstance. We want to get there, but of course, it's a decision point made by doctors at the command table, not by politicians, because we're talking about the safety of our most vulnerable. There's additional funding put in the GSN, the Grant for Student Needs, for all boards of education. Every single board in Ontario has more funding. In Toronto, for example, $55 million more in order to enable them to prepare and plan for all those circumstances for September.
Next question.
Next question comes from Chris Rushowy from the Toronto Star. Please go ahead.
Hi, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks. My first question is for Minister Lecce, and it's with regards to school reopening this fall. There's been a lot of concerns raised about working parents and how they're going to handle any scenario if kids are not in school full time. There's other jurisdictions, they're looking at extra classroom space in unused public buildings or commercial spaces, and I'm just wondering if Ontario is looking at any creative options for students to return full time or anything else that you're considering.
Yeah, I mean, part of our aim is to get students back into class in a conventional setting. It's something that the government has always wanted. The prerequisite is safety. We're working with the command table on ensuring the health and safety protocols are robust, that gives confidence to parents that they could be safe. There's additional funding in place for cleaning, as you know, and staffing through the Support for Students Fund. And of course, we are working closely with boards of education and encourage them as well as they build out their plans in a localized manner to be innovative with options to deliver education. But we have confidence that we can get there, that we can get kids in class each and every day. It just will require the continued collaboration with the Chief Medical Officer of Health so that we're able to provide you, the parents of this province, with absolute confidence that the plan, the funding, and the professional development that will be done before school commences could give confidence that you could send your child to class safely in September.
Follow-up.
Okay, on another issue, back to COVID, the Toronto Board of Health has sent a letter and it's urging the province to take action to fight COVID in the city's northwest corner, which is actually in the Premier's riding, because it's been so hard hit by the virus. They're asking for things like increased testing, faster results, free accommodations for self-isolation, and I'm just wondering if the province is going to take these steps, what your plans are.
I'll turn it to Minister Elliott. Yep.
Well, one of the things that we did when we responded with our revision to our testing strategy was to be able to respond to areas that are in breakout. We have done that, of course, as you know, in the Windsor-Essex area with agricultural workers. We're prepared to do that wherever else we need to do. So we're certainly happy to look at the situation in northwestern Toronto. If they need help, if they need excess testing, of course, we will help out. We're also working with the federal government who's helping provide quarantine accommodations as well. So it's really important that we all work together, municipal, provincial, and federal, in order to make sure that we respond appropriately to COVID-19. But we're certainly happy to assist with mobile testing units in the assessment centers that we've already set up.
Next question.
Next question comes from Tina Yazdani from City News. Please go ahead.
Hi, Tina.
Hi, this question is for Minister Lecce.
Yep.
When looking at racism in Ontario schools, one of the biggest criticisms that has come up is that the curriculum doesn't adequately address Black history. Are you looking to make any changes to that? What are you doing to address the curriculum issue specifically?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I know in grade 3, 6, and 9 within the curriculum, there are specific references to from a Black history perspective codified in the curriculum. I also know that in each and every grade, there is a anti-racism lens applied to the curriculum that's being provided. We have unveiled today a very important step forward to deal with racism within our schools, to deal with the racism that I believe manifests through sort of in our schools, within our communities, and our broader society. And so we have to do better in this respect. It's why we've brought forth a plan on suspensions, on streaming, on professional development, on diversifying our educators within our classrooms. And that, I think, is an important step. What it also allows us to do is build upon this action, because this is not a one-day event. We know that in order to change the hearts and minds of our population, to build a culture of inclusion and respect, it's going to take a lot of work. And that work is starting today in a very meaningful way. And so we're going to continue our work with, of course, the community advocate, with Jamil, Jivani, and others, to listen to that advice, to how we can better reflect the true diversity of our province within our curriculum, within our leadership of our schools, and within the broader province.
Follow-up.
Thank you for that. And just to switch back to COVID-19 here, and maybe this is best for the health minister.
Sure.
We've heard from a nurse who still hasn't received pandemic pay, and now she's hearing the pay will only apply to the time she spends directly assessing COVID-19 patients. So the unit manager would have to determine what percentage of each shift the nurse spends interacting with COVID patients. We're wondering if this is a directive that's coming from the government, and was that the intention for the pay?
No, that's not the case. It's applied to everyone who has been in contact, who's been designated. There's 375,000 people in Ontario that will be receiving pandemic pay. They should be receiving it very shortly, in fact, by the end of this week, which is quickly approaching. But no, it's not going to be weighted based on the percentage of their shift that they spent working directly with COVID patients. We know that many people, many nurses, in fact, interact with COVID patients on every part of their shift. They are the true heroes in all of this, and they will be receiving pandemic pay for that entire period. That was stated by the government.
Next question.
Next question comes from Michael Crawley from CBC News. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mike.
Yes, hi. A question in relation to the Windsor area from my colleagues at CBC Windsor, or Windsor Essex, actually. According to Ontario Health, of the about 175 farms that employ foreign workers, it appears that only about a couple of dozen have actually gone and gotten their workers tested. What do you think of that, and is there anything that the province can do to get more testing done on these farms?
Well, we have a complete team down there from Ontario Health, Public Health, Emergency Services from the province down there, and constant communication with OMAFRA. The farmers are cooperating, the workers are cooperating, so it's all hands on deck down there. I'm going to be down there next week. I'll be talking to the farmers. I'll be speaking to the both mayors down in Kingsville and Leamington, and I'll be able to see firsthand and look at the results. But we have a complete team down there, and we're working through it. You saw the cases spiked a little bit yesterday. Half of those cases came from the area of Essex. So we're onto this, Mike.
Follow up.
And I have a stage 3 question for you, not about when, but what. Can you give us any clearer picture of what stage 3 will actually look like? In other words, what restrictions are we going to see being lifted, and which ones would stay in place? And can you get it all specific about whether, for instance, bars would be allowed to open to have patrons inside? What about for restaurants? What about gyms, cinemas, those kinds of things?
Well, hopefully in the very near future, if it gets through the health table, then we'll roll that out. Right now, I don't have a list in front of me to give you exactly what's opening, but again, I want to make sure that the health table approves it. I don't want to give you a list and then all of a sudden the health table doesn't approve it. So it's going to come very shortly, hopefully sooner than later.
Next question.
Next question comes from Michelle McQuigg from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Premier. This is a question for Minister Lecce. First, on the streaming announcement today, you indicated that the math curriculum would be the first to be de-streamed, and I believe you said it would be next September rather than this September.
Yeah.
What other plans do you have for de-streaming? Are there other subjects that you plan to include? Is it going to be pushed back and the streaming process begins at a later grade? I'm just wondering if you can shed some light on the specific plans.
Yeah, thank you. The government has unveiled a new math curriculum for grade 1 to 8 that will take effect in September of this year. Something we felt very important about getting out, modernizing it, and ensuring that it is aligned with the labor market needs of our province with financial literacy and coding. We've also committed to unveiling a new curriculum for grade 9 math in September of 2021. That will be the first curriculum in Ontario that will be de-streamed for grade 9. Now remember, Ontario is the only province in the country that streams in grade 9 that early. A decision point that is made, as the Premier noted, in grade 8 for a 13-year-old having to make a decision for their life. And so the OECD has recommended moving streaming to a later grade, grade 10 and or 11. We'll be moving that back. And I think, to be quite honest with you, this is going to open a conversation about streaming and the efficacy of streaming. You know, in Toronto, the Toronto Public School Board, I will give them credit, they commenced a process of de-streaming their curriculum some years ago. What they have seen is they've maintained the integrity of learning for those students that that were in the, the academic stream, if you will, as likewise while lifting up the performance of those students who were in the applied stream. And EQAO was the data point that gave us that. And so the fact is, both can be achieved. So I think today we're communicating a clear intent to bring forth a de-streamed curriculum to lift that expectation, part of a $200 million four-year math strategy. In the negotiations, we had the Support for Students Fund, $200 million that is dedicated to the priorities of students, one of which is math, a core area of knowledge that we know they need for their personal lives and for the broader economy. And so those investments are in place. We're also putting a mandatory test for new educators in Ontario, for teachers, that they must meet that grade 9 math standard. And likewise, we're providing $20 million to incentivize them to take professional development and training, additional credits, qualification courses to improve their skills, because I know many of them do in fact want to be part of that solution. We are doing everything we can, from the training to the curriculum to the practice of how we teach, to including things like social emotional learning within it, to really try to change the trajectory of math, because after a decade of trying under a different system and under the defense of the status quo, as Jamil spoke about, it's so obvious when nearly half of students, or rather over half the students, are not meeting the provincial math standard, can't meet a basic math standard. We need to do business differently in this province. And this plan will help that. It will unleash the full potential of every child, most especially racialized kids who have felt ignored. It's the racism of lower expectations. It's not really believing in their potential, and we need everyone in the system to start doing that, and that work will start this year.
Follow-up?
Thank you. And my next question has to do, again, with reopening in September. I've been speaking with people in northern and rural communities about their concerns about the reopening protocols. They are preparing all the 3 scenarios as mandated by the government. They're expressing a preference for everyday schooling, which is what you indicated earlier today, but not necessarily what came through earlier. A couple of weeks ago, the preference seemed to be that you were proposing a hybrid model be the sort of go-to option.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can clarify that for one, but also indicate whether or not you're willing to consider a regional approach to reopening, given the different geographical constraints that different regions are operating under, as well as the different caseloads in play.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. What we announced and what our government's position on reopening is that, given the fact that no government will know with precision what the data and the health and the risk associated with COVID will be in September, we've asked school boards, every board in the province, to present us with 3 plans. A plan for day-to-day in-class learning, 5 days a week, conventional delivery, with heightened health and safety protocols. The second option is an online option. God forbid we have to use it. And the third option is blended, with an assumption that public health may come to us in the future. They could say that there cannot be more than 15 children in a classroom, capped at 15 and cohorted. We are going to be ready for each and every scenario, based on the incredible progress of the people of this province, based on your adherence to public health, and really what has been inspiring Herculean unity of the people of this province. We're now at a point much different than we were 3 or 4 weeks ago. And that data is fluid, but it's moving in the right direction. It gives us promise about our reopening plan to get to where those boards, and to be fair, where a lot of parents and where every member of our caucus wants to go, which is day-to-day learning. These kids need it, especially after being out of class for so long because of COVID-19. So we agree with you. We are with you. The obligation now is to build a health protocol that gives confidence to everyone, our staff, our administration, and of course our kids and their parents, that we can do it safely. And that's why we're working so closely with the command table, with Dr. Williams, with the Deputy Premier and others, to build a protocol that works, that keeps kids safe.
Okay, this will be last question.
Last question comes from Travis Danraj from Global News. Please go ahead.
Hi, Travis.
Hi there, Premier. I've got 2 questions for Minister Lecce.
Boy, thank you, guys. You're giving me a break today. This is great. I'm going to have Lecce here every day. Okay, go ahead.
Minister, will the government commit to hiring more educators so that students in this province can go back to school full-time in the fall?
Well, the government has unveiled a plan to increase spending in every single school board in the province of Ontario. The Grant for Student Needs, which is the main vehicle for funding for school boards, is up over $730 million net this year for September. As I noted, the per pupil funding per child, is up around roughly $250 more this year than last year. The enhancements for special education and math supports are up. The Learning Opportunities Grant, over $500 million is being dedicated for supports. And remember, in the negotiation, as I noted, we got the Support for Students Fund concluded, which is a fund tailored for hiring of staff. But unlike the pre-existing fund, the Local Priorities Fund, this matches the priorities of parents who've overwhelmingly said they want to see more staffing, more presence of math educators, of special education mental health supports, and we agree. And that's why that program, that fund is actually tailored and narrowcasted for hiring specifically of those types of educators. And so, in some boards in the province, as you will know in Toronto and others, they've indicated that there's net hiring happening this September than last September. So the funding, we believe, is in place to enable a successful restart. From a research perspective, the greatest impact on a student is the quality of the educator. So while we agree, of course, with the merits of hiring staff, we have done that. There's $200 million set aside in that fund for that purpose, an increase overall to give boards that ability to hire more personnel should they need it, and many of them will, particularly in custodial staffing, where there's $100 million set aside to do just that, to hire upwards of 2,000 custodians should the province and the boards within it require that. But in addition to people, it also comes down to the quality of educator, and that's why we are investing in creating an element of standards. We're investing in more training, professional mandatory training, and we're providing $20 million within our $200 million four-year math strategy to incent them to take free, improved math courses so they could be better specialists in the areas of math, which is something that is important. And of course, there's additional funding going in, $10 million more for mental health to hire more psychologists, more psychotherapists, more social workers. And in the context of this announcement that we're making today, of that $10 million ancillary investment, new money, after this Premier doubled the mental health portfolio under the peak of Liberal spending as a proof positive that we care deeply about the wellness of these kids. $1 million of that $10 million is being dedicated to support racialized kids to really give them those supports. So there's more resources in place, there's more staffing in place, and we really do believe that will help schools reopen positively in a few short days.
Follow-up?
Okay, I didn't really hear a clear answer to the question, but I want to move on to another question that I have, and it is central, and it's a question that Lucas asked right off the top and that you've been asked repeatedly. As the Minister of Education, you said that you would give parents a single plan by the end of June, not 3 different plans. Is it not your job to provide clarity to taxpayers, some who are worried that they are going to lose their jobs or have to quit their jobs because of childcare responsibilities when it comes to school in the fall?
It's my obligation, Travis, to have a plan for every circumstance that can manifest. It's why we are preparing for each and every scenario that can take place. If there is a lesson learned from COVID-19, it's to be ready for the unknown. It's why we're going to scale up and improve our online learning program. It's why we're providing professional development for every educator to do that, to educate using that method better, to create synchronous live learning expectations for every student should, God forbid, we need it. It's why under the blended model, we've worked with public health to use a cohorting model that allows these children to be kids, but still to go to school, and it's why we have worked very hard to create a health and safety protocol for a return to school conventional day-to-day model. I understand fully that parents in this province want to know with clarity what September will look like, and our government's plan is to have a readiness, an operational readiness in our school boards to respond to the local circumstance as it arises. And based on the incredible work of the people of this province, we are moving in the right direction. And so, we're going to work very closely with the Chief Medical Officer of Health to provide further details on that conventional delivery model. We've got to continue to work with him. The data is moving in the right direction to get to the point that I can look to you and the parents of this province to say it is safe to do so, to send kids back to school each and every day. And that likewise applies to childcare as we look at efforts to improve and rather enhance the amounts of capacity of children that could be within these centers. We know this is important to you. We're working around the clock to get this right. When it comes to our kids, we're going to do whatever it takes, as the Premier has said, to invest, to support, and to create a health protocol that gives confidence to the people of this province.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.